morning. Think of your life as a story, and you are the author of that story. Now, think about all the people you've met, the places you've seen, the feelings that you've felt. You see, the experiences that we have and the decisions that we make eventually tell the story of our lives. And if you look closely at your story thus far, you'll start to understand who you are at your core. I would argue that we all have greatness within us. The challenge is knowing ourselves well enough to tap into that greatness. I really started to explore my life story when I entered the Dragon's Gap class here at STAGEN. Vid was my assigned coach, which quite frankly was terrifying, but ended up being one of the greatest gifts on my journey. During one of our coaching calls, Vid asked me, "What is that one string that can be pulled all the way through your life that defines you at your core?" Well, it definitely was not obvious to me at first. But as I journaled and sifted through the decades, a pattern emerged. It was a beautiful, sometimes painful, story that inspired and informed who I am today. My journey, or my story, really starts in the first grade. This is when I figured out I wasn't like all the other kids. Part of the daily class routine involved taking turns reading aloud. Well, reading did not come easy to me. Luckily, my teacher, Mrs. Hurst, would move in the same order around the room every day. So I would spend time counting the kids ahead of me, trying to figure out which page would be mine to read. Then I'd read ahead. My palms would sweat, my body would heat up, and then it would become my turn. My voice would shake, and I would inevitably butcher the words on the page. Always ending the exact same way, with me feeling humiliated. Well, this pattern continued on for several years, until the public school system decided to put me through days of testing. And when it was over, the educational experts came to me and my parents and said, "Elyse is just a below average student. You really shouldn't expect much from her academically in the future." I didn't know it then, but this completely shattered my academic confidence. I found ways to cope. Without knowing why, I was really drawn to the smart kids in the class. I figured out I could learn from them. I couldn't read, but I became a master of asking questions and listening to comprehend material. Well, my mom ended up being the hero because she would not accept that her daughter was below average. She saw something in me that the experts didn't, and I like to believe that she knew me before I could possibly know myself. So after more testing by more experts, I was finally diagnosed with dyslexia. Now, this all seems a bit crazy today, right? Because kids are diagnosed every day, and the teachers and the schools are equipped to teach to these differences. But in the late 70s and early 80s, these discussions were not mainstream. The diagnosis haunted me for decades. I spent years with tutors learning to read, and I made progress, but I remained petrified to read aloud, and I struggled to read in silence. In the 11th grade, my mom took me to have some aptitude testing done, and I remember being so excited, thinking they were going to highlight, all of my talents and the path that I should take in life. And then this devastating blow when the test administrator said, I really don't think Elyse will make it through a rigorous 4-year college. The reading will be insurmountable. So once again, all those feelings of humiliation just flooded my body. And it's at this point in my story that I start to understand that string that can be pulled all the way through my life that really defines me at my core. I don't know how, and I don't know why, but something inside of me always wanted to prove those experts wrong. Something inside of me knew I was not going to let them define me. I was so driven to prove to myself that I could do anything I put my mind to. Now, I will say that test administrator was right. I did not complete Notre Dame in 4 years. I graduated in 3. I recently shared this with a group of high school students trying to figure out what they wanted to do with their life. And my goal in sharing it was really to empower them to understand that no one defines your life for you and that you are in control of your destiny. I also wanted them to understand that success is very, very different than perfection. And in these days of social media where everyone looks like perfection, the reality is that no one is perfect, and everyone encounters obstacles and barriers. But it's how they respond to them that makes them rise or fall. When I was done, a former track coach of mine was in the audience, and he spontaneously got up to share a story about me from high school, which I'm going to share with you because I think it shows how this string was not just pulled through my academic life, but was also pulled through all aspects. So I was a junior. We were favored to win the track meet. I was the final leg of the 4x4 relay, each girl running 1 lap around the track and passing the baton to the next girl. As the third girl rounded the curve, she was coming down the straightaway, we were in first. All I had to do was grab that baton, run like I was trained to run, and we'd win. My heart was pumping, electricity racing through my body. I was so ready. The handoff was smooth. I turned to accelerate, and boom. I tumbled to the ground, ended face up and backwards on the track. Now, there were numerous ways I could have responded to this event. I could have been pissed off. I could have beaten myself up, told myself I was an idiot, or I could have just been okay with failing. But I did none of these. We boarded the bus back to the school. When we arrived, the coach said, "Elyse, good night. You'll get him next time." And I looked right at him, and I said, "We're not done. I didn't finish." And who the hell knows why, but I laced up my spikes, I jogged out to the track, I got down in the starting position, I imagined that handoff, and I ran that 400 like my life depended on it. You see, it wasn't about winning a medal or having the fans see me succeed. It was about proving to myself that I could do it. And as I've reflected on this, I realize that it mirrors countless other moments in my life. Only in hindsight do I now know that perseverance is an internal drive that needs no external validation. Perseverance is not about trying hard. Perseverance is about stepping through the fear and the failure to unleash your greatness. Throughout my life, I've been able to call upon this internal drive. But there have been moments when I have been paralyzed with fear, and I needed others to help me find the courage to move forward. When I was about 30, I found myself at a business dinner in Atlanta with 12 other men, aging in ranges from 40 to 60 years old. Dressed in suits, we sat down for what should have been a very forgettable business dinner. As with much of my life, I was the only woman at the table, but I didn't take note of that until the appetizers arrived. And one man from the same company as me, who was very, very good friends with our general manager, picked up the plate of fried plantains and loudly interjected to the table, "Elyse, would you like some fried penises?" The table went silent. As the plate was passed to me, I sheepishly said, "No thanks." Now, I wish I could tell you that the story ended there, because if it had, I wouldn't remember it today. However, the evening was filled with unconscionable conversations about the size of men's genitals and other sexual escapades. And the evening culminated with the men egging each other on, and the same man that offered me penises on a platter yells out, "Hey guys, get out your ones. We've got Elyse right here. Elyse, get on the table and dance for us." It was like time stood still. Now I ask you, what would you have done if you had been at that table with me? What would you have done if you had been me? What would you have done if your daughter had been in my situation? I ask you this because over the course of my life, I have been subjected to many situations like this, and some worse. I ask you this because how you respond matters. Well, let me tell you what happened. No one was brave enough to shut it down at the table. I remained silent. But 2 days later, one man, without my knowledge, reported the events to our HR. He spoke out for me when I was too fearful to speak for myself. And I'm forever grateful. I didn't know it then, but his bravery was just one page in my life story that eventually helped me find my courage. And years later, when I realized it was my turn to speak out on behalf of hundreds of women that were too fearful to speak for themselves. It took me a decade to step through my fear. A decade to break my silence. It took me a decade to find my courage to persevere. And this is coming from a girl who knows how to persevere. We may think silence is harmless because we think it means we don't have to get involved. But what I am learning is that even if we didn't cause the problem, it still might be ours to solve. Too often we remain silent because it's easier. But as Martin Luther King said in all of his greatness, our lives begin to end on the day we become silent about things that matter. The things you do today matter. For they have the power to start a cascade of change. If you know who you are at your core, you'll know how to respond. If you know who you are at your core, you will know how to summon the courage to persevere, no matter the consequences. As I stand here today, I'm still thinking about that string, and I'm pulling on it every day as I write my story. As a CEO, just like in that track meet years and years ago, just when everything looks like it's going so smoothly, obstacles pop up and knock me off my course. In my business, we have production problems, we have people problems, we have cash flow problems. But I now know it's how I respond to all of these obstacles that makes the difference in if my company succeeds or just stalls out on that track. Find that string that can be pulled through your life. There is always going to be someone telling you that you're not good enough. And there's always going to be someone there to knock you off your course. And I promise you, it is always going to be easier to remain silent about things that matter. But it is how you respond to all of these things in your life that will determine if you unleash your greatness or not. Your life is waiting on you to respond, and the time is now.